Good morning again, everyone. I wanted to say, let me make sure I have sound here. More sound? Is that good?
Yeah, you can hear me.
Okay, you can hear me. I wanted to say that these question and answer times have been very rich. Even this morning, I was looking back for many years at the ananda.org website. I used to be a part of it myself. They have, I don't know what they call it now. They used to call it Ask the Experts, but I think they've changed that name. I hope they did, actually. But anyway, people are always writing in questions. We all have so many questions that come up as we move along the spiritual path. And it's interesting, each of our questions might change, but the answers that are given to anybody's questions, the answers are, in a way, for each of us, ever new. Because in every moment of this life, as we move along this spiritual path, we have a totally different view, a different ability to absorb the wisdom, to feel the light. That's the nature of the path. Our souls just move closer and closer to realizing, to having that memory of their divine nature. So this morning, I was just randomly, just as a way of moving into this bhav, this energy of questions and answers, reading questions that were answered years ago, and I read the answers to them years ago, and then reading them today again, and realizing what a different impact the answers had on me. So it's a beautiful thing to have an opportunity to ask our questions, realizing that each of us, when you ask the question, other people are listening for the answers in their own heart. And we each find something in those answers that is meaningful to us, a way that we can expand. This is what happens when we're genuine on our spiritual search, as of course we all are, or we wouldn't be here. We hear something. We hear the message that is there for us to take our next step forward. And the other thing that I realized as I read those answers is that no one answer is complete. We're here, I have no idea what's about to be asked. And of course, I'm doing my very best to tune in so that these masters can use this channel right now to respond to the person who's asking. But sometimes the answer just evokes other questions. So I want to say, you can keep sending in questions on Facebook. You can do it on live stream, though you need to open an account on live stream. Even for me, that took about 2 minutes. So I bet most of you can do it very quickly. Then you could ask questions right there. But if your questions don't get answered, or if I haven't been able to tune in to exactly what you're asking, please feel free to send me, an email anytime, Shanti@anandapaloalto.org. I will either answer your question then, or we'll bring it to the next question and answer period that we have. So with that, I hope that you all feel perfectly comfortable to ask whatever questions you have, every question on the spiritual path, every question coming from that place of genuinely wanting to know God is a great question. So let me hear what the first question is.
How do I navigate the line between practicing self-control or tapasya and suppression? At what point does it become detrimental to give up something I enjoy for my own spiritual growth?
Was the question heard? No. Okay, you didn't hear that question, only I did, so we'll repeat it again. Slowly, Lakshmi.
How do I navigate the line between practicing self-control or tapasya and suppression? At what point does it become detrimental to give up something I enjoy for my own spiritual growth?
That's a very good question. And that ability to know when we're ready to move, really to take our next step forward, and to ask ourselves, when are we just simply maybe not being honest with ourselves or trying so hard on the path to move forward that we literally simply, suppression is a psychological term, of course. So with all of our psychological will and might, like this, can you see my fist? Which is different than willingness, which is different than what it means to be able to open to our next moment of spiritual growth. They're very different things. Suppression never serves us spiritually. So we don't even want to hold it like that, even in moments where we have to continue to do our best to move away from habits or thought forms, which are in some ways very much the same, or just the ways we've become accustomed to moving, to move into a spiritually elevated place. There are times where that's very difficult for us, but it's still not the same as just pure suppression. Suppression is always going to come back, and suppression is always going to make itself known. So we have to constantly be holding that habit, that behavior, whatever it is, again, sometimes just the way we think, up to God, up into God's love. We have to constantly be remembering to ask for God's help when we're trying to move beyond a habit. And we all know, if I'm just to be honest here, that there are moments when we cannot do that. We can't let go of that yet. There was such genius, such purity of spiritual teaching, really, when Swamiji taught us to always say to ourselves, I haven't been able to do this, whatever the this is, yet. Always holding open the possibility, the knowing, not the possibility, but the knowing that that will come. For him, it was quitting smoking. He just kept saying to himself, I haven't been able to do this yet, which implies, but I will. And I think when we have a habit that we can't let go of, one of the ways to keep moving forward with it is invite God into it with us. No matter what it is, ask God to be there with you. Remember, and this is so important, Master told us, God doesn't mind our mistakes. What he minds is our indifference. And what he wants only is our love. So even if there are times where we are behaving in ways that we know is not a behavior that has been purified by God's love, it's not a behavior that's in and of itself going to be moving us closer to our divine nature, the very act of insisting that God come and be there with us changes the nature of it. It just simply does. And remember this is also from Master. Master said, a saint is a sinner who never gave up. We cannot think of ourselves as sinners, no matter what we're doing, no matter how horrible we think it is. That is not how God sees us. God sees us as perfect beings. He sees us as his children who are making the decisions that all of us as prodigal sons need to make. When will we be able to turn around and move back towards God? And that act of saying to God, Divine Mother, come and be with me right now, come and be with me. That is our way of making spiritual progress. The action is never quite as meaningful as our intention. Remember that. It's very important. God is watching our heart.
There is tremendous civil unrest.
Lakshmi, I just want to add one more thing to that answer. Everything I said, I feel is the truth. And I want to say, it is important for us to be stretching ourselves. And the very nature of a stretch is that it takes us just beyond our point of comfort without doing injury. So it's not good for us spiritually to then say, as long as I'm inviting God, I can keep doing this. I remember one time I wrote to Jyotish. Somebody had been coming to me for spiritual counsel, and we had spent a lot of time talking about a behavior that this person was not at all proud of, but had not been able to let it go yet. So he was behaving in a way that he knew was not good for his spiritual growth, but he had found himself to be powerless over it. And we had spent a long time talking about it. And I wrote to Jyotish. I did not, of course, reveal who the person was, but I said to him, here's what the behavior is. Do you have any suggestions? And Jyotish wrote back. He was just as loving and respectful as he ever is, saying to me, I'm sure you've thought of all of this. I'm sure you, Shanti, I wasn't really thinking of any of it, but we both knew this, whatever he was about to say, he was saying, a lot of this has come through. But he said, make sure that you tell this person that Master has said we have no control over the first moment when that thought comes into our mind. But after that, we need to jump in and take control. So as much as possible, when the thought comes for a behavior, smoking a cigarette, whatever it is. One of the questions I read this morning was about committing adultery. And worse, things can be worse. They can always be worse. We all need to gather whatever spiritual power we have, whatever inner strength, whatever gets added by calling on God, and say no. And that is not hurting us. That is not mere suppression. That is in finding our own spiritual power, inviting God in, and raising our energy. So I did not in any way want to imply that as long as we're inviting God to be there with us, it's enough. We do need to keep stretching. We just need to know, feel that line where it's a perfect stretch, and maybe 3 times out of 5, we won't need to go back to that behavior. But even when we do, we have God with us.
How does one work on opening their heart, especially when overcoming past trauma? And how does one reconnect with and channel emotion?
Both parts of that question have really one answer, because opening our hearts, and I will assume that who's ever asking that question is asking it from a place of wanting to open our hearts, meaning in pure love, or to pure love. That opening our hearts means inviting divine love in, really wanting to raise whatever it is that we have called love until now, all of the human ways that we can love our partners, our parents, our children, our pets, nature, many of our behaviors, whatever it is that we've genuinely loved from a human perspective, that we are talking about how do we take that and move it through the heart chakra, always holding our awareness at the point between the eyebrows. Why do we do that? We do that because through meditation, through prayer, through staying conscious, through certainly the practice of Kriya Yoga, but even if we're not Kriyabans, all forms of meditation begin the process of drawing energy in and magnetizing it. And we want to be magnetizing it from the point between the eyebrow. We want that to be where the main magnet is. So whatever comes in any other way is drawn up to this center of Christ consciousness, to the center of God awareness in each of us. So we take all of that love that we felt, and in meditation, certainly, but there's other ways to do this, that we envision our heart center at the very core of our being. I've told many people recently, maybe get a beautiful artistic image of the chakras. They're available online, they're available in many places. Find one that you feel drawn to, that resonates with you energetically. Keep it in front of you while you're meditating. And when you get your energy, when you can feel it coming up to the center of the heart, even if you can't find it in that chakra with the sound or the color, you're not feeling it in that way yet. When you feel your heart, look at the heart chakra on however it's been depicted in that way, and just imagine energy flowing back and forth from your heart to that heart chakra, from your heart to that heart chakra. And at some point in that circular exchange of energy, that flow, grab it and bring all of your attention to the point between the eyebrows. That is one way of beginning to know how to transform emotion to devotion. All of the emotion that we feel needs to be transformed into devotion, certainly to really develop our relationship with the divine, but even to begin to know the truest love, which we could call emotional when it's sent out. Probably much of the love that many of us have known in the world is much more emotional than seated in the love of God. But when we begin to know that, we also know that the true purpose of relationships and of all of the love that we feel out in the world is a way to practice our love for God. And that every one of those relationships will benefit and grow in ways that really are beyond our ability to know now, when it becomes transformed into a divine love. And we begin to know that because of how much less personal it feels, how much less conditional it feels, how much without need, how much less reactive, that no matter what happens in those places where we've loved, nothing touches that love that we feel in our hearts. People can disappoint, do things that would have previously been disappointing to us. They can behave in bad ways. They can misbehave. They can get angry at us. They themselves can be very emotional. We are staying calm and uplifted and feel that joy of true divine love. We are not disappointed in them, ever. We don't get reactive and get angry. That's when we know that we have transformed emotion into devotion. And that is the whole point of the spiritual path. So I'm trying to remember the wording at the beginning of the question. Lakshmi, will you repeat it for me?
How does one work to open their heart, especially when overcoming past trauma? And how does one reconnect with and channel emotions?
And I will say, and I'm saying this with great awareness, and I hope who's ever asking this question can feel the compassion and the sensitivity. I've spent a lot of my life working with people who have gone through great, great trauma trauma that I have chosen to never share when I'm sharing any stories, because there are some images we don't want to have implanted in our minds. And I'm saying this to say, I think that I really know the degree to which traumatic experiences can happen and affect us. But here is the truth. Whether we've lived in this life through trauma, great trauma, or not, number one, we've all lived through great trauma in some life. We've all lived through some of the experiences that I've heard about. And we are all on a spiritual path, and we are all headed to the exact same pinnacle. And nothing about what I just said changes, whether we've been through the trauma in this life or before. So if we have no memory of it, we're still using the same techniques. And one day we awaken to the realization that the love in our hearts has grown. The love from God and for God has grown so much within us. We feel its truth, we feel its presence, that we wake up and we realize that we have forgiven those people, those circumstances. No matter how hard we've tried before, by using every psychological tool that we can, and maybe we've made great strides with it, but nothing but the love of God can heal our hearts. So the goal remains the same, and we just keep practicing and practicing. Maybe we need a guide, a real in-life guide. We need to find help in the form of teachers and leaders. But the goal doesn't change. The goal is to fill our hearts with God's love. And when we do that, there is no room for fear or hate or anger. We're human beings, so we occasionally drift back. The cure, if you will, is always the same, and that is to just keep practicing love and kindness and compassion ourselves in whatever way we can, and to keep every antidote for fear, it's courage, for anger, it's peace, for hatred, it's love, to keep practicing every one of those till more and more and more we live there with an occasional foray into the other feelings, as opposed to living in those feelings, those emotions, with an occasional foray into the divine. And that's what happens with meditation, and that's what happens with satsang, with other spiritual seekers. That's why we do it. We'll never figure it out. We just keep practicing. And then one day, it's there. I'll share a personal story. My mother was a woman who knew she herself had been abused. She never spoke to me about it, but my sense as I got older was that it was a horrible abuse. I did know my grandmother, and she had a lot of meanness in her. But my mother lived with a lot of fear and a lot of a sense of herself that was so much less than who she is. Of course, I only came to see that later. She was a great lady, very bright, very creative, had an enormous ability to love, but she wasn't living that with us when we were children. And she was never physically abusive, but she was emotionally abusive and she was demeaning. She was always pointing out what we weren't. She just didn't have it in her to help us see who we were. So I was raised with that. And 1 year of my life, I decided that I was going to do everything in my power to forgive her for the way she had treated me and us. And the whole world around me at the time, all of my friends, so many people were saying, why would you forgive her? You deserve to be angry. You should be angry. But by the grace of God, I was already feeling, I wasn't on this path yet, but something in me knew that my anger at her was killing my soul. That's what it felt like. It was hurting my soul, the deepest part of myself. So in spite of what everybody was saying to me, I said to my husband, this year is about forgiveness. I read about forgiveness. I went to workshops on forgiveness. I prayed about forgiveness. And one morning, and it's just like this, I woke up and I woke my husband up out of a sound sleep, and I said to him with great joy, you won't believe what's happened. He's out of a sound sleep. He said to me, what? I said, I have completely forgiven my mother. He looked at me. He said to me, are you sure? And I said, I am sure. And that was it. I had been through years of therapy, many things, and maybe it all had its role. But the prayer, the meditation, the absolute commitment, I wanted it unambivalently. And God gave it to me. I practiced loving her day in and day out, long before I actually felt that love. And it's not just that I forgave my mother, that experience of unconditional love, of acceptance of others, of myself, exactly as we are, of deep, deep, so beyond forgiveness, pure love. And she and I had the most beautiful, I call it perfect, and perfectly loving relationship for the last 10 years of her life. It was beautiful. It was God's grace. That's how this comes to us. That's what we need to see.
There is tremendous civil unrest in America right now around racial injustice. It hurts my heart to see people suffer, but I don't know how to help in the most positive ways.
This morning I prayed. Somebody's going to ask me this question. And I said to Master, help me to not cry and to find the best answer. It's so painful what's going on right now. We're here in this play. We're here as human beings because we have a lot of spiritual progress to make. We cannot help but feel what's going on at that deeply human level. There's no way, if your heart, one has a heart, which of course we all do. I know this wasn't exactly your question, but I want to say it. There is no way to not feel the injustice, the pain, the utter inhumanity of some of what's going on. There's no way not to realize that there are souls who are born, who are on the same path we are. But, as Swamiji says, this path is long and winding, and we're not all at the same place on the very same path. And wherever we are, we need to be in this world with people who still feel that they are being satisfied, winning, justifying themselves, even finding love in ways that look to us utterly not just appalling, but impossible. Just, there's no reckoning with it in the human mind and in the human heart. One cannot. I've told a story several times that within this story lies the pain of it and the answer to it. And in fact, I might have told this story in the last question and answer period that we had, but it's worth telling again. Years ago, I was in a conference, a meeting, with a spiritual teacher whose name was Ram Dass. He died not that long ago, but he was a very great soul. He knew a lot about truth. And in this meeting, somebody mentioned a woman whose young child had just died. I don't even remember how it came up. And several people spoke to and about, several people in the audience, that woman whose child, maybe the woman was there. I don't even remember now. This was a lot of years ago. But the woman was anguishing. She was crying a lot. She was really grieving, and grieving in an emotional way. And people started to speak up, and they started saying, well, she just doesn't understand anything about a spiritual life, just shows that she has, how immature she is spiritually. One of the people said, soon as she realizes nothing really happens when you die, her child didn't really go anywhere. All of the truths that we can hear, but run through gross misunderstandings, unknowings at some really unfortunate level of the human condition. And when everybody else was done speaking, and obviously it was going to now go to Ram Dass for him to comment, that man just started sobbing. He just sobbed. I mean, whole body shaking for 5 minutes. That's a very long time when you're in an audience of hundreds watching this great spiritual teacher that you've come to see. And when he finished crying, he just sat there as still as he could be for a minute or two, and then he moved on to the next question, the next point. And that sobbing and that silence just spoke volumes to me. It really allowed me to see that there are things in this world that are unspeakably painful. They can never be dealt with at the human level. They can only be dealt with by holding on to what we know to be true spiritually. God is with every soul. He is every soul. He sees exactly what is happening. He will intervene in exactly the way he knows it is the correct way to intervene, and correct way here means allowing people to move through certain karma, allowing other people to be, unfortunately, creating more horrible karma, and to be helping those of us who desperately want to be moving towards the light, to move towards the light. People are creating their own karma. God can only help them when he knows that they are open to his help. He cannot force that. And our job, those of us who have come to where we've come to, is to pray for the well-being of every soul. Even in our healing prayer today, I said, pray for a spark of light to enter into some of those souls that are still so lost in darkness that they haven't yet been able to see the light. That more violence doesn't need to be perpetrated as a means of undoing violence. That those great souls who have come before us, the Mahatma Gandhis, the Martin Luther Kings, that their spirit prevail right now, and that each of us, with as deep, as expansive, as uplifted an ability as we have to hold our own experience, our knowing of non-violence, of true love, that we just keep filling the world with it until soon the light overpowers the darkness and people will be drawn to it. I was watching the news last night saying to myself, how is this helping? Picking up canisters of tear gas and throwing them in the face of policemen. I understand the rage. I understand the injustice. I feel it myself. But we know that the way through this is not that. And people are where they are, and they need to move forward in the way they need to move forward. Our job is to bring light here, to love everyone, to be able to watch the news and to open our heart that the people who are demonstrating, the people whose lives have been lost, the people who are being treated so badly, so unjustly, and the people who are trying and doing their best to make it better, and those who are in positions of power who are still not making it better, everyone, that we send our love to everyone. Masters said, a room can be in darkness for thousands of years. The instant you turn on a light, the darkness disappears. That light is God's love. That light is the light of infinite consciousness. To whatever degree each of us own it, we have to transcend our own emotional reaction, transform it into pure love, and bring that love into the world. The more love there is in this world, as it expands, as it grows, the less hate there can be. That's the only answer. To live what we know to be the truth, as hard as it is. And will we get pulled in? I was sobbing with the news last night. I was literally sobbing. It's painful. That's the truth in this world, is that God is everything. God is all the light and he's all the dark. And I had to keep looking at that news and reminding myself of that. Every bit of it is a manifestation of divine energy. I don't see it. I don't see the purpose. I don't totally see the way out. You know, you want to scream at God. If you have all that power, just come, touch them, heal them, put the light in them. Not yet. It's up to us. We are God's channels. That's how we have to be right now. And trust God. Open to that light, let it come through, and trust.
I've discovered within myself a deep-seated and unreasonable fear that my family and loved ones will discover something about me that they don't like, which will cause them to disown me. This seemingly isn't a rational fear, but it has very real effects in my life. How can I overcome this fear?
You know, sometimes the only way through something is to go right into it. We're often trying to fix things outside of themselves. And ultimately, the answer to almost every question is going to be the same. And that's why Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar kept saying, or was it Lahiri? I'm sorry, practice more Kriya, Lahiri. No matter what anybody asked him, he answered, practice more Kriya, an avatar. So I say that not lightly, but truthfully. The answer to everything lies in our meditation. Having said that, and knowing for sure that when we're up against terrible fear or terrible pain, terrible hurt, terrible anger, it's very hard to sit and meditate. Swami, I was just saying this yesterday in a talk that I gave, that Swamiji speaks very clearly about when you cannot overcome a fear, a dislike, a pain. Sometimes you have to go right in it, which is terrifying. You have to say, all right, I am going to look at you, pain, and march right into you. I'm going to look at you and I'm going to come right in. And that means different things, that happens in different ways, but sometimes we need to do it. So honestly, I would want to sit alone with you to answer that very specifically for you. But here's what I would say. You may need some help, meaning literally some psychological help, good, from a therapist, help and support to find out what are you really afraid of? What is that? I don't know. Is it, where does that deep-seated experience of being unlovable come from? To be able to see it sometimes, that's what we might need to look at before. We can't just always come in with a spiritual solution. I don't know who's asking this question, so I need to be honest. I have suggested to many, many people that they get help at that level of the psychology of something and then keep going from there. But the fear, we know, is within ourselves. So with help in a safe place, to say to ourselves, what am I afraid of? What am I truly afraid of? May not even be something from this life, certainly, but maybe it is. Many of us feel unworthy, not as smart as we are, unlovable. I've been there myself. I've prayed harder about that than I've prayed about anything in moments where I felt unworthy. So I don't know. I also know that sometimes, though this is not where the full answer is, and I don't know your family, but if you know for sure that it's not a truth, then you might need to go to them and talk to them about it. You might need to hear and feel their love to break through it. All the time, holding on to spiritual counsel, all the time. I was just telling somebody yesterday, because I'm a physician, of course, most of you know that. I've had a huge practice of internal medicine, and then I moved onward, upward, inward in my life, and have been doing a fair amount of spiritual counseling. I've had the opportunity to refer many people to psychotherapy. There are many times where I think people need that. But I've always said to them, go and see the therapist, but keep coming here. And I mean that, because even most very great therapists, and I happen to think a few exist, they can be very helpful. But those therapists who are going to help you grow, let go of some old hurts, realize ways that you're stuck emotionally, and we need to do that sometimes. We can't sweep that under the proverbial carpet and think it's never going to come back to torment us. Those deep-seated fears, they come back. So let's neutralize them. That's what we need to do. We can learn a lot in therapy, then we neutralize them spiritually. And we need to keep doing that. So our meditation practice, there have been times where I haven't been able to meditate in my life. I used to keep open, empty books at my altar and a pen that I loved holding. For years and years I did it. When I couldn't meditate, I would either write my prayers, I would just speak to God that way, because writing really slows us down, brings us into the moment, or I would just write mantra, filling books and books and books with mantra. Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jaya Jaya Rama, Shri Ram. Or, I love you, God. I love you, God. I love you. Over and over and over. Whatever it is, an uplifted mantra, affirmation that's going to hold you up here, even while you're struggling here. So, I'm not sure what you need, but I know that many of us wrestle. Let's be honest, we wouldn't be here if that weren't the case, if we weren't still drawn by delusion in some way. So we need to face the delusion. We need to, at the same time, be working on developing spiritual strength, courage, working in our spine with our chakras, moving energy. We have to, because ultimately, that's where the healing is. That's where true healing is. Thy healing presence, we say in our healing prayers. So that's what we're looking for. But we need to step along the path at our own pace and deal with those fears. I hope that helps.
I am watching many of my family members struggling deeply during this time. What can I do to uplift their energy when they are not on this path and they don't know these teachings?
That's a very good question. And, we speak to this very point so often throughout the year with the teachings that we're reading every Sunday. There's many readings. There is particularly the reading that says, when Jesus says, don't pass pearls before swine. And I've said in my own sermons on that, when I was younger, I hated that. How could Jesus be calling people swine? It felt, of course I had no understanding of it, such a deep, deep teaching. And Jesus also said, I come not to bring, did he say peace, but a sword. And that's another one that it's, what would we do if we didn't have these great masters explaining these teachings to us? I feel so much gratitude every time something like this comes up for Swamiji, who just translated this all into a language that we could understand. And I think this is when we need to call on those teachings, because ultimately we cannot share the teachings as we know them with anyone who's not interested in, willing, ready. And in fact, what Jesus is saying in that don't pass pearls before swine is we can even make it worse for them if we try. Because if you've ever tried to convince somebody about something political or religious that they don't already believe in, you know it just brings up enormous resistance. And then next time, when they're presented with that uplifted teaching, they just have that much more resistance in them. So we don't want to do that. We always need to wait for the teachings till people come and ask us. Always. Under every single circumstance. Even when people are on the path. Either they've invited us to be honest with them as a generic statement, or they come with a specific question. Otherwise, the better part of wisdom and compassion says, don't go there. And when we do, it's more about us than it is about them, and it doesn't work. However, living the teachings in front of them, just keeping ourselves calm, peaceful, uplifted, joyful, with humor, with a lot of love, and sharing that love, listening, all of these things that are, and listening without judgment to where other people are, because so many people are suffering and they don't know how to not suffer. And no matter how gently I've tried to offer some suggestions to my loved ones in the last few weeks, what I find, because I am erring on the side of gentleness, is it's just not heard. It's not possible for them. It's just not. Everybody's doing their best, but they can't hear it. So we have to be it. And eventually, at least some of them seem to come around and say, boy, you seem to be going through this with much greater ease than I'm feeling. How is that? Or whatever it is you're doing in your life that has you. My little granddaughter, when she was 7, she wrote me a note, and she said, since we can't see you right now, I'm going to just sit here and remember how calm you always are. It was so precious. And then she wrote me a note and said, let's talk about calmness when you're here next time. You know, of course she's 7, she hasn't yet developed all of the other defenses, but it's precious. Souls begin to notice. And when they notice, do your very best, like you would with a child, to ask yourself, what are they ready to hear? Offer them what they're ready to hear, even if it's a drop of what you know. Because, you know, that's what the ocean is made up of, all of those drops. And it just helps, whatever little bit we can offer. But we have a lot to offer right now by living these teachings and by not allowing ourselves to be drawn into arguments, to be drawn into feeling that we know better and we have something to teach them. That's just our own delusion. I just got caught in it a couple of weeks ago myself. I've told the story over and over. I won't. But when it comes with that much feeling and emotion, better to wait and just, as I said, do the best to live your path.
I find myself to be empathic and absorb others' feelings and energies easily. How can I be strong in myself and centered in God and less influenced by others around me?
Yeah, very good question. I seem to answer a lot of questions by telling stories, but I just feel like Master has given me these amazing stories. When I was taking some courses in between being a nurse for years and getting ready to come to medical school, my husband and I, he was a physician, I was a nurse, we both worked in the same emergency room on weekends. It's a very busy emergency room down near San Diego, really busy, particularly on weekends, because it's such a great play area right on Mission Bay. I would work 8 hours, he worked 12. I would finish early and go sit in the doctor's room and study. One day we saw a patient, he's the doctor, I'm the nurse, and she came in with a very bad vaginal infection. And she was very distressed about it. And my husband did the workup, and it turned out she had a bacterial infection called Gardnerella. And at the time, it was thought to perhaps be a sexually transmitted disease. There were questions about it, but certainly everyone felt it could be transmitted sexually. He, who was very busy in this busy emergency room, very quickly said, don't worry, not that big a deal, Gardnerella, here's a prescription, go. And she did. She left. And about an hour later, I had this feeling, and this is so many years ago, but I had this feeling that she was suffering. It came over me. I was still working. I mean, I was still in my 8-hour shift, but it was so compelling that I went outside like I had her suffering in me. I didn't even know she was suffering when she was there. She just said, okay, thank you, and walked away. An hour later, she was sitting out in her car. I found her in the parking lot, drawn by this inexplicable force. She was out there sobbing, feeling so ashamed of herself for having this infection. And I just got in the car with her, and I held her, and I just spoke to her logically, reasonably. There's nothing to be ashamed of. We're not even sure, I said at the time. But even if it was, I mean, there but for the grace of God go many of us. You know, it was, anyway, she felt better and she left. About 3 or 4 hours later, I'm sitting in the doctor's room alone, and I feel that I have developed a vaginal infection. I felt it. I couldn't believe it. I go out and I say to my husband, when you're done, you're going to have to examine me. I can't believe it. I just suddenly developed this vaginal infection. Now, I had been married and only with my husband for years. And I had her infection. And it really stopped me in my tracks. Somehow I knew, I said to myself, this is a vaginal infection. It's treatable. But this could be cancer. I need to find a way to keep my heart as open as it was and not take on other people's energy or karma. Now, I know I'm just getting to your question, but I think the story holds a lot. I didn't even use the word karma. I'm not sure if I knew the word karma then. I don't think I did. But I knew that I had to find that way to live as the empathic being that I am. Otherwise, I'd be shutting myself down from my soul. I'd be separating myself from my soul. I knew that then. I had a different language, but I knew it. And yet, find a way to let, I just have to use the words I know now because I don't know how it came to me. Their karma be theirs and mine be mine. And that is the truth. My karma is to be empathic and to be compassionate and to be with people in a way, this is what I've been given, that they feel seen and heard and understood. And in that, there is so much room for healing. It is not mine to think that I heal them by taking on their karma. Let's face it, only very, very, very great saints can do that. And even they suffer with it unless they're an avatar. Somehow, without any of that, I knew that. So how do we go about, and this is what our teachings are. This is why we take Raja Yoga and we become Kriyabans and we keep coming to classes and we keep learning and expanding and uplifting our energy, because the answer to that is that their karma really is their karma, and they do need to go through whatever it is they're going through. It was also her karma to have a nurse walk right out of the emergency room and hold her for 15 minutes. She's probably never been held like that in her life, with that much love and that much caring. So she had the infection, but she had an opportunity to be loved. People have things in the world, but they're also, everything that comes to us is an opportunity for our further growth. And our growth is always about opening to the divine. And God is love. So we have to keep practicing being near others with our mantras, with our belief, telling ourselves in our own minds, that's their karma. That's what's happening for them right now. What is my role in it? It is rarely for one human being to take on the dis-ease of another. Rarely. I feel within myself that there have been moments for me where for a little bit of that, it's been the truth. I have felt it not like a great spiritual teacher would know it. I don't mean that. Like what happened, I felt happened to me, so I could learn this lesson. But every once in a while, I share in somebody's pain with them as a way, it's almost not conscious, but it eases their pain enough that the light and therefore the healing can come in. But almost never, close enough to never, that that's how we should hold it. They have their karma, we have ours. We don't help them. That is usually an emotional reaction to want to take somebody else's disease, pain, suffering. So we have to get strong and honest with ourselves and begin to know ourselves with the kind of clarity that we can feel when something's ours. Oh, look at what's here for me in this. What am I going to learn by being near this person who's going through their own karma, whatever it is, a great loss, a cancer, any other kind of an illness, whatever it is, even extraordinary joy. We each have our own karmic paths, and that's the teaching here. So really the question is, how do we keep learning the teachings and relearning them and absorbing more and more and more? I think this is why there are people who take Raja Yoga 4 or 5 times. Every time we take it, every time we teach it, take it, anything, we learn more about this, and that's just the way that we come to these realizations, these absolute knowings, and on an energetic level, we're transformed, and then our hearts are open. But whatever somebody else is going through simply doesn't come to us. It's not ours.
Our spiritual teachers teach the importance of right action. With so many activities to perform on a daily basis, how do we know what right action is, and how do we choose to act rightly in every moment?
So the question is, how do we become saints? I think that's the question that's being asked. But it's a very good question. And I'll just say this. Right action means any action that has us feel, not emotionally, this is a spiritual question with a spiritual answer, that has us feel better, more uplifted, more conscious, more expansive in our views and understanding spiritually of this world, that has us feel more kind, more compassionate, more joyful, that has us have an experience of any spiritual quality or tendency that leads us more towards knowing any of the affirmations that Swamiji's written for us for every week of the year. Everyone. We can look at any one of those. More kind, more into positive thinking. They just go on and on. That's what right action is. And it's unfailing. There will never be a mistake with it. You will never be involved in right action and feel worse about yourself, or feel spiritually and energetically contracted. You might feel some pain because people get angry with you, or that you don't want to be angry. You might also have the human emotion running alongside of it. But if you can work your way back into your astral spine, your center of power at the third chakra, your heart at the fourth chakra, if you can draw your energy to the point between the eyebrows, if it is truly right action, this is right action is a phrase that Krishna uses all throughout the Bhagavad Gita. It's exactly how he holds divine awareness, intuitive perception. So that's what we're talking about. It's always uplifting. If you have something you want to say to somebody or an action you want to perform, ask yourself, how does it feel in your heart? Do you feel better? Do you feel calmer? Do you feel at peace or in peace? If you do, try it out. And if you don't, if there's the tiniest little voice saying, are you sure? Or if the moment you say, this is a great idea, but you take a little step forward, little step, and suddenly you get questions, just stop. That's what we have to do as human beings, because none of us are perfected in the way that we know 100% for sure, except for those moments where we're blessed with an inspiration. And those we know beyond a doubt. So it's our spiritual practice that just leads us again to more and more and more often knowing what is right action.
I have recently become aware of a resistance within me to engaging with life, a type of reluctance to get involved with daily responsibilities and needs. Is it possible to be interested, engaged, and find enjoyment in the world, but not lose myself in it?
Absolutely. Let me just say that. This is one of those things that might be true, but isn't always easy. And we rarely move towards true spiritual growth by overtly, I'm going to use this word consciously, shirking responsibility in the world. Rather, it's better for us, as Krishna counsels Arjuna in the Gita, to grow spiritually through the action that brings us into the world. If somebody is, and I hear this a lot from women who have small children who may be working. So they're married, they're working, they have children. That's when I hear it the most. But I hear it from men and others as well, that they're finding it very difficult to find that balance. And it is difficult, in part because we have preconceived notions of how we do things in the world. So what we feel is the way to be a good mother, a good wife, a good husband, a good employee. We could just go on and on, but just to be in the world, that may need some adjusting. So that may be. Somebody was just telling me a story that their partner of many, many years was needing to spend some time, this was before this pandemic, in a nursing home. And they couldn't find their way to not be there twice a day for at least 2 hours. They just felt enormous guilt. So without going through that person's story, it's an example. Can we be in love with someone and behave well with them and treat them well and show our love and bring our kindness and care to them in less than 4 hours a day? Could we do that in an hour or two a day and not feel guilty? Because the guilt is what makes us of the world. And all of those tendencies that pull on us, fear, guilt, again, jealousy, anger, those are the things that make us be of the world. Attachment to a certain degree of wealth. We could just, material wealth, we could just go on and on. The more we learn to let go of how it's been taught to us, shown to us, come through in a desire in us from a past life, let go of our previous notions of what being in the world means, and begin to live more from a place of spiritual truth, the easier it is to be in the world, the easier it is to be with your children when you have a practice of every time you look at them, you decide to tell yourself you're taking care of Krishna when he was a baby, because you are. That's the truth. So if we begin to see everything that we're doing in the world in a divine light, we are less feeling like we're moving less and less like this in my spiritual place in the world, spiritual world. We begin to bring our spirituality into the world with us, and we find ways, they come to us, to be less and less inclined to be moved off of our path. Even while we're being a great mother, this is just an example because it can be anything, a great husband or wife, a great employee, we can be totally out in the world because many of us need to be in the world, but most of us don't want to be of that world anymore. We're finding new ways. Now sometimes, and this is very hard, a very commonly asked question, that means that we lose our appetite for many of the things that we have shared with people we love in the world. And we don't want to go out to eat in the same places. We don't want to have the same types of entertainment. We don't want to stay up as late because we want to get up earlier and meditate. We might not want the television in every room on in our home all the time, or the same music being played, because we're changing our vibration. But we've got to find the balance as long as we have responsibility in the world. It is true that Krishna says that at certain moments in our life, lower dharmas, or certain dharmas that we've had, dharma means right action, they've been right, are superseded by higher dharmas. And he even tells us, if that happens and you have to move beyond this lower dharma, I will be there with you, I am always watching you, and I myself will make sure that you do not accrue any bad karma. That's wonderful. I read, that's a stanza right near the end of the Gita, in the 18th chapter, not quite the last stanza, but very close. I just read it to a friend yesterday because it was relevant for them. I read it often in my own life, but we need to be very sure then, particularly if it comes to big dharmas, like people leaving their family. I mean, even Babaji sent Lahiri Mahashaya back to his family and his work after he had told him he'd be bringing Kriya to the world. We need to have that discernment of a master. If we don't have it, we need to find one who can help us before we just nonchalantly let go of those things. Better for most of us to be finding ways to spiritualize our behavior in the world. And it's challenging. We are often, I myself, at times, need to be in positions in the world that I think were I left completely to my own devices, I wouldn't choose. Who really knows? But instead, I have to say to myself, this feels like it's your karma and your dharma now. How will you do it in a way that will help you grow spiritually? So that's what we have to look for and find.
How do we overcome the feeling of being wronged or being a victim, especially when others have been unkind to us?
You know, Swami Kriyananda, this is a very good and a very difficult question. Not a difficult question for me to find answers, but a very difficult situation to live through well. It's hard. You know, and again, it's like the pain of what's going on in the world. It's real. We are wronged at times. That's what's so painful about watching some of the news right now. This is not right action, but there's so much wrong action going on, and it just grabs your heart. It's hard. And look at the numbers of times in Master's life and in Swamiji's life that they were truly treated very badly, that lies were perpetrated, that, I mean, Master was taken to court. When I think of it, I can hardly hold it in my head anymore. I can't let myself get too close to the crucifixion. I just can't fathom. People did that to Jesus Christ. They put him up on a cross and put nails through him and then jeered at him and made fun of him. People took Master to court. I mean, people lied about Swamiji. They just made up lies and they slandered him all over newspapers and radio shows. And I mean, these things happen in the world. That's what I'm saying. They're real. Swamiji certainly lived through pain about some of what happened with him. When he was thrown out of SRF, he felt pain. He really did. He told us that. He's written about it. And it lasted for a while. It wasn't a momentary, in life experience. But he wasn't angry. He wasn't belligerent. He wasn't wanting to get back at those people, nor did Master. And granted, they're masters and we're not, but that's the example. The example is to do the very best that each of us can in every moment when we are treated badly, the best we can to solve that problem in the direction of the divine. I myself had an experience, the worst of that for me was when a friend, about 1.5 years ago now, we got into a fight that turned mean. Hard to imagine, given the two beings who were involved, but it happened. And I was not without blame in the fight at all. But since I'm telling this for a particular reason, my friend said things to me the way maybe only those who are closest to us can, that went to the core of something that I guess I needed to feel I knew was true about me, the way I was holding it, not the way this friend just pierced it. But obviously, I needed in some way to know it was true. Something that really mattered to me about myself. And I left. I just said, I'm done with this discussion, with this argument. And I walked away. And I went home. And I say this truthfully, it was very hurtful. It's hard to describe that much later when you're out of it. But it was so hurtful in the moment. And it felt like it had such potential repercussions for me in terms of how I live, where I live, everything. And I knew that I couldn't stay there. And by God's grace, I got that I needed to take all of that feeling and lift it up, transform it, that I could not let it fester or grow where it was. And I took days off from work, and I put up huge, I'm sure many of you who are listening have heard this, but that's okay. I need to hear it again myself. Let me just put it that way. A huge version of the yamas and the niyamas. And I went through every yama and niyama and asked myself, how can I be better? How can I take that? I was really, I guess there was some anger in there, but mostly I was so hurt. And, hurt usually becomes anger. I can't even go back and remember it now, and I sat there for days, just feeling that energy, bit by bit, be transformed, till I felt beyond the argument, beyond the hurt, beyond any thoughts of how is this person holding me and what does that mean, back into a place of real calm. We on this path, if we're genuinely on this path, we need to keep finding our willingness to go there and to say, somebody else did what they did to hurt me. What am I going to do with that now? My goal is still the same. I don't want to just be self-righteous and go out into the world and be right. I knew then that I could convince a lot of people that I was right. People would say, that's terrible. How could they have done that to you, you poor thing? That felt horrible every time I thought of it. It's not what I wanted. I wanted to be calm and uplifted and bigger and close to God and feel right about that. That's what we all want. That's what anybody who's listening right now wants. So the only way to do it is to see how you can take whatever energy's there and transform it and not be involved in it. If you're involved in it or reactive to it, totally understandable. We're not going to all get this right. Believe me, I have failed this test more than I care to say. But as soon as we're involved in it, we're part of the problem. Soul consciousness is solution consciousness. What is the solution here? So that's what we do with it. Transformation. Always in the direction of God.
How do I train myself not to judge others?
I feel like Mahatma Gandhi right now. This is a cop-out, but I'm sure most of you know the story when the mother brought the kid to Mahatma Gandhi and said, he eats way too much chocolate. You have to tell him to quit eating chocolate. And Mahatma Gandhi said, okay, but bring him back in a week and I'll speak to him then. And the mother brought the kid back in a week and Mahatma Gandhi said to him, you should not be eating so much chocolate. The mother said, if you were just going to tell him that anyway, why did I have to take him away and then bring him back? And Mahatma Gandhi said, because I myself first had to quit eating chocolate. Yeah, this is very hard. That's not the answer to the question, but I just need to be honest. Here's what I've done with it. What I've done with it is take Master at his word that we don't have control over the first thought that comes into our minds. Remember I said that, I think, back with question number 1 or close to it. But after that, we have to take control. You know, it's so interesting. I never finished that answer. Now, I don't know who's still with us, who was with us at question number 1, but I have to interrupt myself because the answer that Jyotish gave to me, did I say this? When he said, tell the person that the instant the thought comes into their mind, right then, they have to start thinking about God. The first instant they find themselves thinking about this behavior that they want to do, that was back a lot of questions ago, right then, try and raise your energy to think about God. May not work, but it might work. It may be, as I said then, even if it doesn't work all the time, it's the right way to go. So, I'm so glad that happened now and not at 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. The answer is, for me, the same here. It's all of our practice. It's everything we're doing. The instant we find ourselves judging, the instant we try and jump in and replace that judgment with calm acceptance and joy, with love for that person or that quality or that suit of clothes that you were just judging, or the way somebody's eating their dinner, or, I mean, let's face it, we could go on and on and on. I was just saying in a talk yesterday, science now knows that we have tens of thousands of thoughts in a day. And the way our brains are wired initially is that 75 to 80% of them are negative. Many of them judgmental. Meditation begins to change that. It literally changes the neurophysiology, the neurobiology. So that's good news. The truth is, the more we practice means all of our practices, chanting, and energizing, chanting, meditating, saying mantras, affirmation, satsang. The more we do all of that, the less inclined we are to judge, because judgmentalness comes from all of that fearful, emotional, egoic consciousness. There's no judgment in soul consciousness. So the more we bring ourselves to a place of soul consciousness, the less we judge. But whenever we're still judging, we have to develop a practice. This is another practice. Say to yourself, the instant I become consciously aware that I'm judging, I'm going to take myself away from it and into a higher thought. That is not easy, not just because of the awareness, but I, at least, have found that judgmentalness is one of the ways that I make myself feel better. We judge others so that we can feel better about ourselves. I don't do that. Or, oh, look at how they're doing that. It's really all about us. So it's not so easy to give up. That ego has a hold on us. It's embarrassing for me to even have thinking the way I'm thinking right now, some of the ways that I do it. I just feel like, oh dear. But the best I can do, as soon as I'm aware of it, offer it up to God, bring myself back to a place of non-judgmentalness.
This is the last question that we have. How can I keep my meditation practice inspired and ever new?
Also a very good question. Also, you know, there are so many ways to do this, and so much has been said and written by Master, by Swamiji, by Jyotish. Jyotish often brings into his talks lists, whether he calls them ABC or 1, 2, 3 or points. He speaks that way. They're always, or very often, not always, they're always wonderful, is what I want to say. Even though my mind resists lists like that. But when I bring myself to be deeply absorbed in what he's saying or writing, just so filled with truth. And I tell you that because one of the things we could all do is go back and find everything he said, maybe in How to Meditate, but beyond that, about ways to keep our meditation ever new and inspired. But I'll just say a few things. This is a moment where I wish we had a panel here, because everybody will come up with more ways. But for me, I pray for that every day. I have taken to sitting in front of my altar, and either before I pray or as part of my prayer, because it will not surprise any of you to know that sometimes my prayers get very long. I really love talking to God. And in part of that, I just start telling God how happy I am to be about to have this time with him. What a joy it is to sit down. I ask him, what are the things that you want to show me? Show me sometimes like I'm a child, maybe through a picture or an image. Teach me today. Let's play together. I mean, I speak to God this way when I sit down. And it just, for me, talking to God, creating space for that meditation brings a newness. There are times where I focus my meditation on something, and it's something different. We've all had meditations where we try and go deeply into Master's eyes. Last week I meditated one day. This picture that we have of Swamiji, I'm looking at it right now, but it's the one that's up there, but I have a huge version where he's in blue and his eyes are so there. And Swamiji has such beautiful eyes that I just imagine all of the rest of my world going away and flowing into them. I do things like this. I just had another thought of I know what it is. I take pictures of the masters, and of Master particularly. And for a long time, before I start my meditation, I hold his third eye to my third eye. It's spiritually invigorating, to say the least. And I feel certain that I'm going to have a beautiful experience in meditation because of that. Sometimes I just sit down and tell Master that I am expecting something wonderful to happen. I'm expecting it right then. And I tell him I'm coming here with the best of my ability. You see, it's just bringing the ever newness in new form, in new thought into it. This is what happens when we meditate in groups, when we're with people who are also really bringing their best to meditation. It changes it. This is with a particular chant that we might do, or a mantra that we practice on every one of our beads, above and beyond Kriya. Again, I wish I could reach out to everybody and say, how do we do this? Because I know even I'm in a room with 3 or 4 people, everybody has an answer to this question. But that ever new joy, it exists within us. It is that feeling beyond our ability to bring it down to words, beyond imagination of expectancy. That's what that ever new joy is, that extraordinary bliss. So everything that we can do to dive back into our heart, the wisdom of our heart, the love of our heart, will bring us that experience I was talking about from the outside in. But make it a commitment, if you're practicing Kriya, that with every Kriya you will dive deeper. Say to yourself, today I'm going to sit and with my Kriyas, every Kriya, consciously dive deeper and deeper and deeper. And if you're not practicing Kriya, every round of Hang Sa, every awareness of inhalation up to the point between the eyebrows, the pause, and then the exhalation. Make each meditation a conscious journey towards God, and He will meet you there. He's waiting. And once we have that moment, then we are living the ever newness of it. Thank you all so much. I just deeply appreciate this time with you and being able to bring, talk about spiritual devotees and spiritual effort to choose to spend all of this time exploring every possible way that we can to not just be closer to God right in the moment, but to find ever new ways of experiencing the divine within ourselves and within each other. We are such a beautiful spiritual family with perfect intention. We have so much to garner from each other spiritually. We need to look at each other that way, as the source of pure spiritual energy, so that we realize that with each of our guru bhais, there's so much potential for spiritual growth. I don't mean in them, I mean in us, in all of us. And the more time we have together like this, the greater our growth, and the greater the love of the growth, even in the difficult moments. So let's close with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, saints of all religions, beloved Swamiji, our hearts are filled with gratitude and joy at your presence that we are able to feel so clearly when we come together as we are in your name. We know you are with us always. Help us to open our hearts, to feel and to hear with the wisdom in our hearts, so that we too become constantly as aware of your presence as you are of ours. Bring us home to thee. Om, peace, amen.